Elon Musk, great to see you. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I mean, we're here at the Texas Gigafactory the day before this thing opens. It's been pretty crazy out there. Thank you so much for making time
Hey,
on a busy
welcome.
day. I would love you to help us kind of cast our minds, I don't know, 10, 20, maybe 30 years into the future, and and help us try to picture what it would take to build a future that's worth getting excited about. You've often said it, the last
Sure.
time you spoke at TED, you said that was really just a big driver. It's, you could talk about lots of other reasons to do the work you're doing, but fundamentally, you want to think about the future and not think that it sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, there's a lot of discussion of like this problem or that problem, and a lot of people are sad about the future and that they're pessimistic, and I think this is not great. I mean, we really want to wake up in the morning and look forward to the future. We want to be excited about what's going to happen. And life cannot simply be about sort of solving one miserable problem after another.
So if you look forward 30 years, this year, the year 2050 has been labeled by scientists as this kind of almost like this doomsday deadline on climate. There's a consensus of scientists, a large consensus of scientists who believe that if we haven't completely eliminated greenhouse gases or offset them completely by 2050, effectively we're inviting climate catastrophe. Do you believe there is a pathway to avoid that catastrophe, and what would it look like?
Yeah. So, I am not one of the doomsday people, which may surprise. I actually think we're on a good path. But at the same time, I want us to caution against complacency. So long as we are not complacent, as long as we have a high sense of urgency about moving towards a sustainable energy economy, then I think things will be fine. So I can't emphasize that enough. So long as we push hard and are not complacent, the future is going to be great. Don't worry about it. I mean, worry about it, but if you worry about it, ironically, it will be a self-unfulfilling prophecy. There are three elements to a sustainable energy future. One is obviously sustainable energy generation, which is primarily wind and solar. There's also hydro, geothermal. I'm actually pro-nuclear. I think nuclear is fine. But it's going to be primarily solar and wind as the primary generators of energy. The second part is you need batteries to store the solar and wind energy, because the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. So you need a lot of stationary battery packs. And then you need electric transport. So electric cars, electric planes, boats. And then ultimately, it's not really possible to make electric rockets, but you can make the propellant used in rockets using sustainable energy.
Right.
So ultimately, we can have a fully sustainable energy economy, and it's those three things: solar, wind, stationary battery pack, electric vehicles. So then, what are the limiting factors on progress? The limiting factor really will be battery cell production. So that's gonna really be the fundamental rate driver, and then whatever the slowest element of the whole lithium-ion battery cells supply chain, from mining and the many steps of refining to ultimately creating a battery cell and putting it into a pack, that will be the limiting factor on progress towards sustainability.
All right, so we need to talk more about batteries, because the key thing that I want to understand, like there seems to be a scaling issue here that is kind of amazing and alarming. You have said that you have calculated that the amount of battery production that the world needs for sustainability is 300 terawatt hours of batteries.
That's
That's the end goal.
Very rough numbers, and I certainly would invite others to check our calculations, because they may arrive at different conclusions. But in order to transition not just current electricity production, but also heating and transport which roughly triples the amount of electricity that you need, it amounts to approximately 300 terawatt hours of installed capacity.
So we need to give people a sense of how big a task that is. I mean, here we are at the Gigafactory. You know, this is one of the biggest buildings in the world. What I've read, and tell me if this is still right, is that the goal here is to eventually produce 100 gigawatt hours of batteries here a year.
We'll probably do more than that, but yes, hopefully we get there within a couple of years.
Right. But I mean, that is
0.1 terawatt hours.
But that's still 1/100th of what's needed. How much of the rest of that 100 is Tesla planning to take on let's say between now and 2030, 2040, when we really need to see the scale up happen?
I mean, these are just guesses. I mean, so please, people just shouldn't hold me to these things. It's not like this is like what tends to happen is I'll make some best guess, and then people in 5 years there'll be some jerk that writes an article. Elon said this would happen, and it didn't happen. He's a liar and a fool. It's very annoying when that happens. So these are just guesses. This is a conversation.
Right.
I think Tesla probably ends up doing 10% of that, roughly. Yes.
Let's say 2050, we have this amazing, 100% sustainable electric grid made up of, some mixture of the sustainable energy sources you talked about. That same grid probably is offering the world really low-cost energy, isn't it, compared with now? And I'm curious about, are people entitled to get a little bit excited about the possibilities of that world?
People should be optimistic about the future. Humanity will solve sustainable energy. It will happen. If we are, continue to push hard, the future is bright and good from an energy standpoint. And then it will be possible to also use that energy to do carbon sequestration. It takes a lot of energy to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, because in putting it in the atmosphere, it releases energy. So now,
Right.
Obviously, in order to pull it out, you need to use a lot of energy. But if you've got a lot of sustainable energy from wind and solar, you can actually sequester carbon, so you can reverse the CO2 parts per million of the atmosphere and oceans. And also, you can really have as much fresh water as you want. Earth is mostly water. We should call Earth water. It's 70% water by surface area. Now, most of that's seawater, but it's like, we just happen to be on the bit that's land.
Right. And with energy, you can turn seawater into irrigating water or whatever water you
absolutely.
need. Yeah.
At very low cost. Things will be good.
Things will be good.
Yes. Things will be
and
good.
Also, there's other benefits, right, to this non-fossil fuel world where the air is cleaner and
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because like when you burn fossil fuels, there's all these side reactions and toxic gases of various kinds, and sort of little particulates that are bad for your lungs. Like there's all sorts of bad things that are happening that will go away, and the sky will be cleaner and quieter. The future's going to be good.
I want us to switch now to think a bit about artificial intelligence, but the segue there. You mentioned how annoying it is when people haul you up for bad predictions in the past. So I'm possibly going to be annoying now, but I'm curious about your timelines and how you predict, and how come some things are so amazingly on the money and some aren't. So when it comes to predicting sales of Tesla vehicles, for example, I mean, you've kind of been amazing. I think in 2014, when Tesla had sold that year 60,000 cars, you said, 2020, I think we will do 500,000 a year.
Yeah, we did almost exactly 500,000.
You did almost exactly 500,000. You were scoffed in 2014 because no one since Henry Ford with the Model T had come close to that kind of growth rate for cars. You were scoffed, and you actually hit 500,000 cars and 510,000 or whatever produced. But 5 years ago, last time you came to TED, I asked you about full self-driving, and you said, yep, this very year, where I am confident that we will have a car going from LA to New York without any intervention.
Yeah, I don't want to blow your mind, but I'm not always right.
But so what's the difference between those two? Why has full self-driving in particular been so hard to predict?
I mean, the thing that really got me, and I think is going to get a lot of other people, is that there are just so many false dawns with self-driving, where you think you got the problem, have a handle on the problem, and then nope, it turns out you just hit a ceiling, because if you were to plot the progress, the progress looks like a log curve. So it's like a series of log curves. So most people don't know what a log curve is, I suppose, but
Show the shape.
it goes up sort of a fairly straight way,
Right,
and then it starts tailing off,
Right.
and you start
And there's a kind of O-shaped
getting
moment.
diminishing returns. And you're like, it was trending up, and now it's sort of curving over and you start getting to these what I call local maxima, where you don't realize basically how dumb you were. And then it happens again. So, ultimately, now these things in retrospect they seem obvious, but in order to solve full self-driving properly, you have to solve real-world AI. Because you say, like, what are the road networks designed to work with? They're designed to work with a biological neural net, our brains, and with vision, our eyes. And so in order to make it work with computers, you basically need to solve real-world AI and vision, because we need cameras and silicon neural nets in order to have self-driving work for a system that was designed for eyes and biological neural nets. I guess when you put it that way, it's sort of like quite obvious that the only way to solve full self-driving is to solve real-world AI and sophisticated vision.
What do you feel about the current architecture? Do you think you have an architecture now where there is a chance for the logarithmic curve not to tail off any time soon?
Well, I mean, admittedly, these may be an infamous last words, but I actually am confident that we will solve it this year. That we will exceed. You say, like, what the probability of an accident? At what point do you exceed that of the average person?
Right.
I think we will exceed that this year.
What are you seeing behind the scenes that gives you that confidence?
We're almost at the point where we have a high-quality unified vector space. Like in the beginning, we were trying to do this with image recognition on individual images. But if you look at one image out of a video, it's actually quite hard to see what's going on without ambiguity. But if you look at a video segment of a few seconds of video, that ambiguity resolves. So the first thing we had to do was sort of tie all 8 cameras together so they're synchronized, so that all the frames are looked at simultaneously and labeled simultaneously by one person, because we still need human labeling. So that at least they're not labeled at different times by different people in different ways, and then so it's sort of a surround picture. Then a very important part is to add the time dimension, so that you're looking at surround video. And you're labeling surround video. This is actually quite difficult to do from a software standpoint. We had to write our own labeling tools and then create an auto labeling software to amplify the efficiency of human labelers, because it's quite hard to label video. In the beginning, it was taking several hours to label a 10-second video clip. This is not scalable.
Right.
So basically, what you have to have is you have to have surround video, and that surround video has to be primarily automatically labeled, with humans just being editors and making slight corrections to the labeling of the video, and then feeding back those corrections into the future auto labeler. So you get this flywheel eventually where the auto labeler is able to take in vast amounts of video and with high accuracy automatically label the video for cars, lane lines, drive space.
And what you're saying is that you think that, I mean, the result of this is that you're effectively giving the car a 3D model of the actual objects that are all around it. It knows what they are, and it knows how fast they are moving. And the remaining task is to
Yes.
predict what the quirky behaviors are. That when a pedestrian is walking down the road with a smaller pedestrian, that maybe that smaller pedestrian might do something unpredictable, or like
Yes.
things like that. You
So-
have to build into it before you can really call it safe.
You basically you need to have memory across time and space. So what I mean by that is, if you because you can't, the memory can't be infinite because it's using up a lot of the computer's RAM basically. So you have to say, how much are you going to try to remember? But like, if it's very common for things to be occluded. So
Right.
like if you talk about, say, a pedestrian walking past a truck where you saw the pedestrian start on one side of the truck, then they're occluded by the truck.
Right.
You need, but you need you would know intuitively, okay, that pedestrian is going to pop out the other side most likely,
Right.
and
The computer doesn't know.
so you need
until
to
it's
slow
done.
down.
I mean, a skeptic is going to say that every year for the last 5 years, you've kind of said, well, no, this is the year. Well, I mean, we're confident that we'll be there in a year or two, or like it's always been about that far away. But we've got a new architecture now. You're seeing enough improvement behind the scenes to make you not certain, but pretty confident that this by the end of this year, in most, not in every city, in every circumstance, but in many cities and circumstances, basically the car will be able to drive without interventions, safer than a human.
Yes, I mean, the car currently drives me around Austin most of the time with no interventions. So it's not like, and we have over 100,000 people in our full self-driving beta program. So you can look at the videos that they post online.
I do.
Okay, great. And
Some of them are great, and some of them are a little terrifying. I mean, occasionally the
Yes.
car seems to sort of like veer off and scare the hell out of people. But
still a beta.
it's still better. But you're behind the scenes looking at the data. You're seeing enough improvement to believe that this year timeline is real.
Yes, that's what it seems like. I mean, like I said, we could be here talking again in a year. It's like, well, yet another year went by and it didn't happen. But I think this is the year.
And so, in general, when people talk about Elon time, I mean, it sounds like you can't just have a general rule that if you predict that something will be done in 6 months, actually what we should imagine is it's going to be a year, or it's like 2x or 3x. It depends on the type of prediction. Some things, I guess things involving software, AI, whatever, are fundamentally harder to predict than others. Is there an element that you actually deliberately make aggressive prediction timelines to drive people to be ambitious? Without that, nothing gets done.
Well, I generally believe, in terms of internal timelines, that we want to set the most aggressive timeline that we can, because there's sort of like a law of gases expansion where, for schedules, where whatever time you set, it's not going to be less than that. It's very rare that it'll be less than that. But as far as my predictions are concerned, what tends to happen in the media is that they will report all the wrong ones and ignore all the right ones.
Right.
When writing an article about me, I've had a long career in multiple industries. If you list my sins, I sound like the worst person on earth. But if you put those against the things I've done right, it makes much more sense. So it's essentially like the longer you do anything, the more mistakes that you will make cumulatively. Which, if you sum up those mistakes, will sound like I'm the worst predictor ever. But for example, for Tesla vehicle growth, I said I think we'd do 50%, and we've done 80%.
Yes.
But they don't mention that one. I'm not sure what my exact track record is on predictions. They're more optimistic than pessimistic, but they're not all optimistic. Some of them are exceeded, probably more are later, but they do come true. It's very rare that they do not come true. It's sort of like, if there's some radical technology prediction, the point is not that it was a few years late, but that it happened at all. That's the more important part.
So it feels like at some point in the last year, seeing the progress on understanding that the AI, the Tesla AI, understanding the world around it, led to a kind of an aha moment in Tesla? Because you really surprised people recently when you said probably the most important product development going on at Tesla this year is this robot, Optimus.
Yes.
Many companies out there have tried to put out these robots. They've been working on them for years, and so far no one has really cracked it. There's no mass adoption robot in people's homes. There are some in manufacturing, but I would say that no one's kind of really cracked it. Is it something that happened in the development of full self-driving that gave you the confidence to say, you know what, we could do something special here?
Yeah, exactly. So, it took me a while to sort of realize this, that in order to solve self-driving, you really needed to solve real-world AI. And at the point at which you solve real-world AI for a car, which is really a robot on 4 wheels, you can then generalize that to a robot on legs as well. The two hard parts, I think, it's not, obviously companies like Boston Dynamics have shown that it's possible to make quite compelling, sometimes alarming robots.
Right.
So from a sensors and actuator standpoint, it's certainly been demonstrated by many that it's possible to make a humanoid robot. The things that are currently missing are enough intelligence for the robot to navigate the real world and do useful things without being explicitly instructed. So the missing things are basically real world intelligence and scaling up manufacturing. Those are two things that Tesla is very good at, and so then we basically just need to design the specialized actuators and sensors that are needed for a humanoid robot. People have no idea. This is going to be bigger than the car.
So let's dig into exactly that. I mean, in one way, it's actually an easier problem than full self-driving, because instead of an object going along at 60 miles an hour, which if it gets it wrong, someone will die, this is an object that's engineered to only go at, what, 3 or 4 or 5 miles an hour?
Walking speed, basically.
And so a mistake there aren't lives at stake. There might be embarrassment at stake.
As long as the AI doesn't take it over and
right.
murder us in our sleep or something.
Right. But so talk about, I mean, I think the first applications you've mentioned are probably going to be manufacturing, but eventually the vision is to have these available for people at home, correct?
Yes.
If you had a robot that really understood the 3D architecture of your house and knew where every object in that house was or was supposed to be and could recognize all those objects, I mean, that's kind of amazing, isn't it? Like the kind of thing that you could ask a robot to do would be what? Like, tidy up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
make dinner, I guess, mow the lawn.
Take a cup of tea to grandma and show her family pictures. And
exactly, take care of my grandmother and make sure, exactly.
I mean, it could obviously recognize everyone in the home.
Yeah.
Could play catch with your kids.
Yes. I mean, obviously, we need to be careful that this doesn't become a dystopian situation. I think one of the things that's going to be important is to have a localized ROM chip on the robot that cannot be updated over the air, where if you, for example, were to say, stop, that would, if anyone said that, then the robot would stop, type of thing. And that's not updatable remotely. I think it's going to be important to have safety features like that.
Yeah. That sounds wise.
And I do think there should be a regulatory agency for AI. I've said this for many years. I don't love being regulated, but I think this is an important thing for public safety.
Let's come back to that. But I don't think many people have really sort of taken seriously the notion of, a robot at home. I mean, at the start of the computing revolution, Bill Gates said, there's going to be a computer in every home. And people at the time said, yeah, whatever. Right. Who would even want that?
Now we have a computer in our pocket.
Do you think there will be basically, like, in say 2050 or whatever, that like a robot in most homes is what there will be, and people will
I think they probably
love
will.
them and count on them? You'll have your own butler, basically.
Yeah, you'll have your sort of buddy robot, probably. Yeah.
I mean, how much of a buddy? How many applications do you thought is there? Can you have a romantic partner, a sex partner?
I mean,
a lot of
it's probably inevitable. I mean, I did promise the internet that I'd make catgirls. We could make a robot catgirl. I mean,
be careful what you promise the internet.
So I guess it'll be whatever people want, really. So.
What sort of timeline should we be thinking about of the first models that are actually made and sold?
Well, the first units that we tend to make are for jobs that are dangerous, boring, repetitive, and things that people don't want to do. And I think we'll have like an interesting prototype sometime this year. We might have something useful next year, but I think quite likely within at least 2 years. And then we'll see rapid growth year over year of the usefulness of the humanoid robots and decrease in cost and scaling up production.
Initially, just selling to businesses, or when
Yeah.
do you picture you'll start selling them where you can buy your parents one for Christmas or something?
I'd say less than 10 years. Yeah.
How help me on the economics of this. So what do you picture the cost of one of these being?
Well, I think the cost is actually not going to be crazy high, like less than a car. Initially, things will be expensive because it'll be new technology at low
Right.
production volume. The complexity and cost of a car is greater than that of a humanoid robot. So I would expect that it's going to be less than a car, or at least equivalent to a cheap car.
So even if it starts at 50K, within a few years it's down to 20K or lower or whatever. And maybe for home they'll get much cheaper still.
Yeah.
But thinking about the economics of this, if you can replace a $30,000, $40,000 a year worker, which you have to pay every year, with a one-time payment of $25,000 for a robot that can work longer hours, a pretty rapid replacement of certain types of jobs, how worried should the world be about that?
I wouldn't worry about the sort of putting people out of a job thing. I think we're actually going to have, and already do have, a massive shortage of labor. So I think we will have not people out of work, but actually still a shortage of labor even in the future. But this really will be a world of abundance. Any goods and services will be available to anyone who wants them. That it'll be so cheap to have goods and services, it'll be ridiculous.
And presumably it should be possible to imagine a bunch of goods and services that can't profitably be made now, but could be made in
Sure.
that world, courtesy of legions of robots.
Yeah. It will be a world of abundance. The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Okay, so AI is allowing us to imagine a differently powered economy that will create this abundance. What are you most worried about going wrong?
Well, like I said, AI and robotics will bring out what might be termed the age of abundance. Other people have used this word. And that this is my prediction, will be an age of abundance for everyone. I guess there's the dangers would be the artificial general intelligence or digital superintelligence decouples from a collective human will and goes in a direction that for some reason we don't like, of whatever direction it might go. That's what sort of the idea behind Neuralink is, to try to more tightly couple collective human will to digital superintelligence, and also along the way solve a lot of brain injuries and spinal injuries and that kind of thing. So even if it doesn't succeed in the greater goal, I think it will succeed in the goal of alleviating brain and spine damage.
So the spirit there is that if we're going to make these AIs that are so vastly intelligent, we ought to be wired directly to them so that we ourselves can have those superpowers more directly. But that doesn't seem to avoid the risk that those superpowers might turn ugly in unintended ways.
No, I think it's a risk. I agree. I'm not saying that I have some certain answer to that risk. I'm just saying, like maybe one of the things that would be good for ensuring that the future is one that we want is to more tightly couple the collective human will to digital intelligence. The issue that we face here is that we're already a cyborg, if you think about it. The computers are an extension of ourselves. And when we die, we have like a digital ghost. All of our text messages and social media and emails, and it's quite eerie actually when someone dies but everything online is still there. But you say, like, what's the limitation? What is it that inhibits human-machine symbiosis? It's the data rate. When you communicate, especially with a phone, you're moving your thumbs very slowly. So you're like moving your two little meat sticks at a rate that's maybe 10 bits per second, optimistically 100 bits per second. And computers are communicating at the gigabit level and beyond.
Have you seen evidence that the technology is actually working, that you've got a richer, sort of higher bandwidth connection, if you like, between external electronics and a brain than has been possible before?
Yeah, so the fundamental principles of reading neurons, sort of doing read-write on neurons with tiny electrodes have been demonstrated for decades. So it's not like this is the concept is new. The problem is that there's no product that works well that you can go and buy. So it's all sort of in research labs, and it's like there's always like some cord sticking out of your head, and it's quite gruesome, and it's really there's no good product that actually does a good job and is high bandwidth and safe and something that you could buy and would want to buy. So, but in it, the way to think of the Neuralink device is kind of like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch that's where we take out a sort of a small section of skull about the size of a quarter, replace that with what in many ways really is very much like a Fitbit, Apple Watch, or some kind of smartwatch thing, but with tiny wires, very tiny wires, wires so tiny it's hard to even see them. And it's very important to have very tiny wires so that you, when they're implanted, they don't damage the brain.
How far are you from putting these into humans?
Well, we have put in our FDA application to have the aspirationally do the first human implant this year.
The first uses will be for neurological injuries of different kinds.
Yes.
But rolling the clock forward and imagining when people are actually using these for their own enhancement, let's say, and for the enhancement of the world, how clear are you in your mind as to what it will feel like to have one of these inside your head?
Well, I do want to emphasize we're at an early stage, and so it really will be many years before we have anything approximating a high bandwidth neural interface that allows for AI-human symbiosis. And for many years, we will just be solving brain injuries and spinal injuries for probably a decade. And this is not something that will suddenly, one day, we'll have this incredible sort of whole brain interface. It's going to be, like I said, at least a decade of really just solving brain injuries and spinal injuries. And really, I think you can solve a very wide range of brain injuries, including severe depression, morbid obesity, sleep, potentially schizophrenia, like a lot of things that cause great stress to people, restoring memory in older people.
If you can pull that off, that's the app I will sign up for.
Absolutely.
I would. Please hurry. Actually.
Yeah. I mean, the emails that we get at Neuralink are heartbreaking. I mean, they'll send us just tragic, where someone was sort of in the prime of life and they had an accident on a motorcycle and someone who's 25 is can't even feed themselves, and this is something we could fix.
But you have said that AI is one of the things you're most worried about, and that Neuralink may be one of the ways where we can keep abreast of it, or
Yes, there's the short-term thing, which I think is helpful on an individual human level with injuries, and then the long-term thing is an attempt to address the civilizational risk of AI by bringing digital intelligence and biological intelligence closer together. I mean, if you think of how the brain works today, there are really kind of two layers to the brain. There's the limbic system and the cortex. You've got the kind of animal brain which is kind of like the fun part, really.
That's where most of Twitter operates, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Tim Irvin said this, like we're like somebody, stuck a computer on a monkey.
Right.
So we're like, if you gave a monkey a computer, that's our cortex, but we still have a lot of monkey instincts.
Right.
So, which we then try to rationalize as, no, it's not a monkey instinct, it's something more important than that, but it's often just really a monkey instinct. We're just monkeys with a computer stuck in our brain. Even though the cortex is sort of the smart or the intelligent part of the brain, the thinking part of the brain, I've not yet met anyone who wants to delete their limbic system or their cortex. They're quite happy having both. Everyone wants both parts of their brain. And people really want their phones and their computers, which are really the tertiary, the third part of your intelligence. It's just that it's like I said, the bandwidth, the rate of communication with that tertiary layer is slow, and it's just a very tiny straw to this tertiary layer, and we want to make that tiny straw a big highway. And I'm definitely not saying that this is going to solve everything, or this is, it's the only thing. It's something that might be helpful. And worst case scenario, I think we solve some important brain injury, spinal injury issues, and that's still a great outcome.
Right. Best case scenario, we may discover a new human possibility. Telepathy you've spoken of, in a way, a connection with a loved one, full memory,
Yes.
and much faster thought processing, maybe. All
Yes.
these things. It's very cool. If AI were to take down Earth, we need a plan B. Let's shift our attention to space. We spoke last time at TED about reusability, and you had just demonstrated that spectacularly for the first time. Since then, you've gone on to build this monster rocket, Starship, which kind of changes the rules of the game in spectacular ways. Tell us about Starship.
Yes. Starship is extremely fundamental. So the holy grail of rocketry or space transport is full and rapid reusability. This has never been achieved. The closest that anything's come is our Falcon 9 rocket, where we are able to recover the first stage, the boost stage, which is probably about 60% of the cost of the vehicle, or of the whole launch, maybe 70%. And we've now done that over 100 times. So with Starship, we will be recovering the entire thing. Or at least that's the goal.
Right.
And moreover, recovering it in such a way that it can be immediately reflown. Whereas with Falcon 9, we still need to do some amount of refurbishment to the booster and to the fairing or nose cone. So, but with Starship, the design goal is immediate reflight.
Right.
So you just refill propellants and go again. And this is gigantic. It just as it would be in any other mode of transport.
And the main design is to basically take 100 plus people at a time, plus a bunch of things that they need, to Mars. So first of all, talk about that piece. What is your latest timeline? One, for the first time a Starship goes to Mars, presumably without people but just equipment. Two, with people. Three, the sort of, okay, 100 people at a time, let's go.
Sure. Well, and just to put the cost thing into perspective, the cost of the expected cost of Starship putting 100 tons into orbit is significantly less than what it would have cost, or what it did cost to put our tiny Falcon 1 rocket into orbit. Just as the cost of flying a 747 around the world is less than the cost of a small airplane, a small airplane that was thrown away. So it's really pretty mind-boggling that the giant thing costs way less than the small thing. So it doesn't use sort of exotic propellants or things that are difficult to obtain on Mars. It uses methane as fuel, and it's primarily oxygen. It's sort of roughly 78% oxygen by weight. Mars has a CO2 atmosphere and has water ice, which is CO2 plus H2O, so you can make CH4, methane, and O2 oxygen on Mars.
Presumably one of the first tasks on Mars will be to create
Yes.
a fuel plant that can create the fuel for the return
Yes.
trips of many starships.
Yes, and actually, it's mostly going to be an oxygen plant, but it's because it's call it 78% oxygen, 22% fuel. But the fuel is a simple fuel that is easy to create on Mars, and many other parts of the solar system. So basically, it's all propulsive landing, no parachutes, nothing thrown away. It has a heat shield that's capable of entering on Earth or Mars. We could even potentially go to Venus, but it's not. You don't want to go there. Venus is hell, almost literally. But you could. It's a generalized method of transport to anywhere in the solar system. Because at the point at which you have a propellant depot on Mars, you can then travel to the asteroid belt. And to the moons of Jupiter, and then to Saturn, and ultimately anywhere in the solar system.
Right. But your main focus and SpaceX's main focus is still Mars. Like that is the mission. That is where most of the effort will go. Or are you actually imagining a much broader array of uses, even in the coming, the first decade or so of uses of this, where we could go, for example, to other places in the solar system to explore. Perhaps NASA wants to use the rocket for that reason.
Yeah, NASA is planning to use Starship to return to the moon, to return people to the moon, so we're very honored that NASA has chosen us to do this. But I'm saying it is a generalized. It's a general solution to getting anywhere in the greater solar system. It's not suitable for going to another star system, but it is a general solution for transport anywhere in the solar system.
Before it can do any of that, it's got to demonstrate it can get into orbit, around Earth.
Yeah.
What's your latest advice on the timeline for that?
It's looking promising for us to have an orbital launch attempt in a few months. We're actually integrating we'll be integrating the engines into the booster for the first orbital flight starting in about a week or two. The launch complex itself is ready to go. So assuming we get regulatory approval, I think we could have an orbital launch attempt within a few months.
And a radical new technology like this, presumably there is real risk on those early attempts.
100%. Yeah. Like I mean, the joke I make all the time is that excitement is guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed, but excitement certainly is.
But the last I saw on your timeline, you've slightly put back the expected date to put the first human on Mars till 2029. I want to say.
Yeah. I mean, let's see. I mean, we have built a production system for Starship, so we're making a lot of ships and boosters. And
how many are you planning to make actually?
Well, we're currently expecting to make a booster and a ship roughly initially roughly every couple months, and hopefully by the end of this year, one every month. So it's giant rockets, but a lot of them. Just talking in terms of rough orders of magnitude, in order to create a self-sustaining city on Mars, I think we'll need something on the order of 1,000 ships. Then we just need a Helen of Sparta, I guess, on Mars or something.
This is not in most people's heads, Elon.
The planet that launched 1,000 ships.
That's nice, but this is not in most people's heads. This picture that you have in your mind so there's basically a 2-year window. Right? You can only really fly to Mars conveniently every 2 years.
Yes.
You are picturing that during the 2030s, every couple years, something like 1,000 starships take off, each containing 100 or more people.
Yes.
I mean that picture is just completely mind-blowing to me.
Yes.
That sense of this armada of humans going
Yeah,
to...
it'd be like Battlestar Galactica, the fleet departs.
And you think that it can basically be funded by people spending maybe a couple $100,000 on a ticket to move to Mars? Is that price about where it has been?
Well, I think if you say like what's required in order to get enough people and enough cargo to Mars to build a self-sustaining city, and it's where you have an intersection of sets of people who want to go, because I think only a small percentage of humanity will want to go, and can afford to go or get sponsorship in some manner. That intersection of sets, I think, needs to be 1 million people or something like that. And so it's what can 1 million people afford or get sponsorship for, or because I think governments will also pay for it, and people can take out loans. But I think at the point at which you say, okay, like if moving to Mars costs, for argument's sake, $100,000, then I think almost anyone can work and save up and eventually have $100,000 and be able to go to Mars if they want. We want to make it available to anyone who wants to go.
Yeah.
So very important to emphasize that Mars, especially in the beginning, will not be luxurious. It will be dangerous, cramped, difficult, hard work. It's kind of like that Shackleton ad for going to the Antarctic, which I think is actually not real, but it sounds real and it's cool. It's sort of like the sales pitch for going to Mars is it's dangerous, it's cramped, you might not make it back, it's difficult, it's hard work. That's the sales pitch.
Right. But you will make history.
But it'll be glorious.
Right. So on that kind of launch rate you're talking about, over 2 decades you could get your 1 million people to Mars, essentially. Whose city is it? Is it NASA's city? Is it SpaceX's?
It's the people of Mars' city. The reason for this, I mean, I have to say, like, we feel like, well, why do this thing? I think this is important for maximizing the probable lifespan of humanity or consciousness. Human civilization could come to an end for external reasons, like a giant meteor or supervolcanoes or extreme climate change, or World War III,
right.
or any one of a number of reasons. But the probable lifespan of civilizational consciousness as we know it, which we should really view as this very delicate thing, like a small candle in a vast darkness. That is what appears to be the case. We're in this vast darkness of space, and there's this little candle of consciousness that's only really come about after 4.5 billion years.
Yeah.
And it could just go out.
I think that's powerful, and I think a lot of people will be inspired by that vision. And the reason you need the 1 million people is because there has to be enough people there to do everything that you need to survive. It's
really the critical threshold is if the ships from Earth stop coming for any reason.
right.
Does the Mars city die out or not?
Right.
And so we have to pass that. That's people talk about like the sort of the great filters, the things that perhaps we talk about the Fermi paradox and where are the aliens, and like, well, maybe the aliens didn't. There is various great filters that the aliens didn't pass, and so they eventually just cease to exist. And one of the great filters is becoming a multi-planet species. So we want to pass that filter, and I'll be long dead before this is a real thing, before it happens. But I'd like to at least see us make great progress in this direction.
Given how tortured the Earth is right now, how much we're beating each other up, shouldn't there be discussions going on with everyone who is dreaming about Mars to try to say, we've got a once in a civilization's chance to make some new rules here? Should someone be trying to lead those discussions to figure out what it means for this to be the people of Mars' city?
Well, I think ultimately this will be up to the people of Mars to decide how they want to rethink society. Yeah, there's certainly risk there, and hopefully the people of Mars will be more enlightened and will not fight amongst each other too much. I mean, I have some recommendations, but which people of Mars may choose to listen to or not. I mean, I would advocate for more of a direct democracy, not a representative democracy, and laws that are short enough for people to understand, and where it is harder to create laws than to get rid of them.
Coming back a bit nearer term, I'd love you to just talk a bit about some of the other possibility space that Starship seems to have created.
Yeah.
So given suddenly we've got this ability to move 100 tons plus into orbit.
Yes.
So we've just launched the James Webb Telescope, which is an incredible thing. It's unbelievable app.
So
It's 2 decades.
An exquisite piece of technology.
It's an exquisite piece of technology, but people spent 2 years trying to figure out how to fold up this thing. It's
Yes.
a 3-ton telescope.
We can make it a lot easier if you've got more volume and mass.
Well, but let's ask a different question, which is how much more powerful a telescope could someone design based on using Starship, for example?
I mean, roughly, I would say it's probably an order of magnitude more resolution. If you've got 100 tons and 1,000 cubic meters of volume, which is roughly what we have.
And what about other exploration through the solar system? I mean, I'm
Europa.
well, Europa.
Big question mark.
Right. So there's an ocean there, right?
Yeah.
And what you really want to do is to drop a submarine into the
Yeah, I
ocean.
mean, maybe there's like some squid civilization under the cephalopod civilization under the ice of Europa. That would be pretty interesting.
I mean, Elon, if you could take a submarine to Europa and we see pictures of this thing being devoured by a squid,
Yeah,
that would honestly be the happiest moment of my life.
pretty wild, yeah.
That would be. What other possibilities are out there? Like, 'cause it feels like if you're going to create 1,000 of these things, they can only fly to Mars every 2 years. What are they doing the rest of the time? It feels